And we should note that Norway and Sweden, two of the other countries accused of being spied on by that Danish broadcaster's report. Well, for more on these allegations, let's go to Remi Piet. He's the senior partner at Mbeli Advisory. And Remi, given these tensions and Biden crossing the pond, if you will, for this first presidency trip, what are your expectations for the meetings with EU officials?
Well, actually, yes, when we're talking about these allegations, I mean, actually those proven practices until 2014, the fact that it came out in the media, the timeliness of this was obviously, the risk was to disrupt the collaboration between European countries and the US ahead of a very important G7 summit on June 11th. There's been already a series of key advances, especially with the gathering of the G7 finance meeting on Friday that agreed on a common minimum level of taxation for multinational around the world. So there's been already a series of good advances, and hopefully this will not be kind of hampered by the news and the recalling of a sad moment of the relationship between Europe and the US, which was the tapping of the phones of key European leaders.
For Joe Biden, how important is the rebuilding of a US-Europe alliance post-Donald Trump?
I mean, it is very important because it is a first statement into his presidency, which is of trying to gather around, a series of countries, the European Union especially, on ideas and joint position towards, a new structure for multilateralism. And so the issue of, the agreements that we've seen already on the finance side with taxation can be followed with a series of additional agreements, especially tackling the COVID crisis, getting an agreement in terms of how to facilitate the recovery of the global economy, and also have a united front when it comes to the structuring of multilateral agreements over the next few years with China, Russia, other countries, but be able to propose a platform.
The U.S. president also heading to the UK. How important was that bilateral relationship now post-Brexit?
Yes, indeed. I mean, you're right to mention, first of all, that is the first large G7 summit since Brexit. The G7 actually happens to happen in the UK, so that first meeting is traditional from Joe Biden. But it's interesting indeed to see how the UK will position itself, especially on issues of free trade and trade agreements. There are key aspects that could also be part of these meetings, such as transparency of supply chains, a series of key regimes in terms of ESGs and sustainable development goals that where we see talks happening in terms of climate change, working tables, or issues also on COVID mitigation and economic recovery. So all these are going to be on the agenda, and looking at the position specifically from the UK, that has been a leading power, especially on transparency of supply chains with the Modern Slavery Act of 2015. There are a few key elements there that could be good blueprints for an agreement with G7 countries.
Remi, in January, The Atlantic, a U.S. publication, said that Biden will try to pull Europe away from China, notably its growing economic ties with Beijing. Can he do that? Does he even need to do that?
Well, right now we're seeing obviously a warming of relationship between the U.S. and the European Union. There's been, very strong tensions under the Trump administration. The idea of pulling one against the other is narrative that is, flung out there, but it's more a question of trying to see, what are the common grounds in terms of multilateral also agreements on such scales as the G7, with Japan being also part of those discussions traditionally, obviously, and then potentially in future, G20 meetings and others. Just provide a platform. It's not so much a question of pulling Europe away from the US, away from China, or whichever. It's trying to find common solutions, especially for climate change, as I was mentioning, global trade and recovery post-COVID. There's incentives for everyone to get around the table.
Remi Piet from Mbeli Advisory, thank you so much for joining us.